Hey everyone, before we get into this next episode, I want to give a quick shout out to Seth Roy of North Mountain Goshawks, and if you're in the market for a new parent-reared North American Finnish or Russian Goshawk for next season, you won't want to sit too much longer without getting on that list. Birds are being paired up as we speak, and it is that time of year, so don't hesitate. Hit them up at North Mountain Goshawks on Facebook or ostringer3@gmail.com, or you can go to northmountaingoshawks.com and get on the list as well. Tell them we sent you, and you'll be very happy with your new hunting partner for next season, I'm sure. And I also want to give a quick shout out to onX. If you are not currently an onX subscriber, you really should be. There's a lot of really cool features that the app has that will enrich your hunting experience. I know I love using the app to track my hunting locations and favorite spots, and it's also a nice tool to use for if you're trying to scout out new locations or get in contact with people to get permission to hunt on their property and stuff too. There's all kinds of great uses for it. And if you go to onxmaps.com to sign up for a new subscription, just use the code HXP20, sign up, and start knowing where you stand with onX. And now, on to the next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast.
I was just hooked. I mean, it's one of the most exciting things I've ever done in my life, and it never gets old. It just never gets old. I mean, we're talking about, I probably spent my first day trapping on a ridge in 1981 or 2, and it's still, you get up there and it's just, it's magic.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and we are back to the world of dachshunds again for this episode, and hopefully you all aren't getting tired of the dachshund content, because there's still going to be plenty more where that came from. If you are, all I can say is sorry, and you'll just have to bear with the rest of us, but there's going to be lots of other content rotated in as usual for everyone. But this episode was recorded while I was with the New Jersey crew back when I was out there in July of last year or so, and our guest for this episode, Brian Bradley, has been running dachshunds for a long time, and Brian is also known for some of the other aspects of falconry that are very important to us, mainly being trapping. So we're just going to jump right in and hear more from Brian about his experiences in falconry and dachshunds and trapping and stuff. So here we go. So, I mean, I know we were talking a little bit earlier. I mean, what's kind of your overall history been? I mean, you've lived in and around this area for quite a few years now, haven't you?
Yeah, I born and raised in Ulster County, New York, near New Paltz, which is basically exactly an hour north of here up the thruway. And when I was very young, my siblings were quite a bit older than me, and my older brother had just started at SUNY New Paltz at the university there, and one day he came home and said that one of his professors had brought a falcon into the classroom and gave a little talk about it, So this is probably 73 or 74. I was probably 7 years old, 6, 7. And so my brother had gotten talking to him, and he invited us to come over to his house. And little did I know it at the time, but it was actually Heinz Mang, who's a pretty famous name in the falconry world now. He's passed away, but at the time, he was really important in the recovery of the beginnings of the effort to get the peregrine falcon back, when they were on the verge of extinction. And so we went over to his house, and sure enough, he had all these peregrines out on display in his backyard on block perches, and I was just blown away as a kid, So I read and studied all I could and obsessed over it, and, the years ticked by, and as soon as I was able to take the test at 14, I did, and my brother actually, he actually took the test too. He took it the first year it was ever given in New York, which may have been 73 or 74, I forget. So he was an apprentice under Heinz, and he dabbled with some birds. He had a red tail, he had a kestrel, he had a great horned owl at some point. But he was really into, he was deep into his schooling, and he was headed in other directions. And he ended up going on, to be an attorney. And so his hands were full. Mine, however, were, birds were all I could think about. So So that's it. I had my falconry license before I had my driver's license, and it's been a driving force in my life ever since.
So, I mean, how many birds did he have whenever you went? Do you remember, like, how many he had just perched in his backyard?
I would say a dozen, give or take. And he had chambers in the back. He had some really nice breeding chambers. Things that he was ahead of his time. I mean, things that you'd see today, he had them back in 1970, because he was academically, he was brilliant. And yeah, he was a pretty amazing guy. I'm very fortunate to have met him. And what a lot of people don't know, and what he doesn't get credit for, is not only being one of the first people to be involved with the recovery of the peregrine, but he was the only guy around here back in those days that was a falconer, and it grew. It's like the branches of like a genealogy tree. It's just like you can take every falconer that I would know in New York and in some way walk it back to Heinz Meng.
So it's kind of like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a perfect analogy. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so what was your early, like, tutelage, I guess you could say, or your early mentorship like under him then? I mean, what was some of your personal experiences with that?
Well, what I found out, and what I realized a lot later on, that he was very, very academic. He's the kind of guy you could take a hike out with him in the woods, and he could talk to you obviously about birds of prey, but I mean, he could talk about songbirds and entomology, insects, plants. That's a such and such tree. That's a so and so beetle. It was just, he was an absolute encyclopedia of knowledge. And he had his falcons. He had a couple of birds that he always flew. He did a little game hawking. I didn't do much of that with him at the time because I was very young. And he introduced me to a couple of other people, which became the small core circle of people that I really, truly kind of grew up with and got involved in hardcore game hawking with. One guy in particular, his name is Ray Penna, lived in New Paltz, and he and I became very close because, again, Heinz had a career. He was a very, very formal academic guy, but Ray was out there running around beating the bushes every day. So we were best friends, and we hawked together for many, many years. Other guys, Louis Rodriguez, I could rattle off 8-10 names. But Ray Penn is the one who gave me a real foundation in understanding the basics of falconry and working falconry in a relationship, and in being intuitive and reading a bird and all the critical things you need to do to train a bird properly.
Yeah. And as far as the age that you were at, I mean, you said that you had your falconry license before your driver's license. Yeah. I mean, so you were how old then? Remind me again.
14. Yeah.
14?
Yeah.
All right.
Because I had to, and trust me, if it was up to me, I would have had it earlier. But at the time, you had to be 14 to get a small game license. So it hinged on that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know the falconry permit aspect of things, and when you can start your apprenticeship and all that. I mean, I know it's different from state to state, but yeah, I mean, it's a huge undertaking for someone that's that young. I mean, I've known several guys that especially like the older gen falconers that started before the rules and regs and all that. And I mean, I've got buddies that tell stories still about how they, rode from, one side of town to the other with the red tail, on the handlebars and stuff. And, I mean, is that pretty similar then to kind of how you approached things as a kid also and got around? Or
yeah, I drove my mother nuts. I mean, she drove me everywhere. When I wanted to go fly my red tail, mom had to take me. One of my brothers had to take me when they were home from college or whatever. And I mean, I pestered anybody who would give me a ride, and I did a lot of crazy stuff on my own. I was driving around catching kestrels on a BC with on a 10-speed bicycle, 20 miles from my house in the middle of winter. Just insane, some of the things I did. But
was that with like several feet of snow uphill and stuff too? Or?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I carried the bike most of the time.
That's hilarious. Well, like, and as far as, some of the different things that you encountered during that time, I mean, I'm sure you probably had some harrowing experiences whenever you were trying to get around and do all that stuff as a kid, I bet, right?
Yeah, well, anything harrowing usually involved me doing stuff I wasn't supposed to do, don't climb up to that great horned owl's nest or whatever, things like that. My brother warned me about, we had some cliff nesting great horned owls in our area, the Shungum Mountains that are famous for all their wildlife, but for nesting peregrines and everything. And I was just, I was up for anything. I was a wild kid, and all I really cared about was getting to know more about these birds. It was a singular focus. I can't really explain it. I mean, I was a little bit of a loner, and being involved in the birds made me even more of a loner because they were my focus. As I got older in high school and stuff, and I got involved seriously in sports, my world opened up a little bit. But I never lost, my passion for birds. I mean, I remember going to high school when I first got my driver's license and my first car. I remember going to high school and sneaking out and skipping class and grabbing my Merlin out of the back of the car and going out to the football field on at the high school and lure flying my bird and then putting him back and running back into school. So just stuff like that. And anybody who's been involved in it and knows the fire has always found little ways to, plug it into their lives somewhere, somehow, I think,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things definitely that it's always on your mind in some way, shape, or form. How can I sneak in this extra bit of time?
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, you weren't really deterred from that very much then as your school career went on, and
not at all. My school career was very, very secondary. I wasn't much of a student. When I put my mind to something and I wanted to learn something, nothing would stop me. But if I wasn't interested, you forget about it. It's going in one ear and out the other. I'm lucky I got it at high school. It could have been different. I could have studied harder and applied myself there. But thank God I didn't, because I'm very happy with the path I chose, and the birds have given me just such an incredibly unusual, enriched, bizarre life, and you go places, see things, and meet people that you just wouldn't in any other walk of life, I don't think. And so, yeah, I'm good. I'm good with not having a master's degree,
Yeah, I'm fine with not having a master's degree either. But yeah, no, as far as falconry goes, I mean, I completely agree with that sentiment. I would have never thought that out of all the endeavors that I've had in life, it's kind of become a little bit of a personal joke between my friends and I, that out of all the endeavors that I've tried throughout my life, whether it be music or whatever the different things have been, it's been ironic that one of the most enriching things that has brought a lot of, I don't know, just joy, consternation, and just overall, I don't know, just diversity to my life has been not only falconry, but, a falconry podcast too.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I completely agree with that sentiment, and I'm not really sure at this point. I can't fathom, how things would have been.
Ooh, me neither. Yeah.
Right. I mean, without this in my life.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't even want to think about it. It's scary. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what just out of curiosity, what do you think you would have ended up doing if it wasn't for this? Been in jail or something, or
no? I mean, I had designs on, if veterinary medicine crossed my mind for years, but again, that involves so much academics and so much school, and I had to be honest with myself. The math and science aspect of it, and all of the things you have to go through to get there, I wasn't prepared to tackle that because I felt like I knew my limitations. That was the only other thing I ever really thought about. And as far as a career, so to speak, that was going to be, paying the bills, I honestly didn't. I was like, whatever happens, happens. I'll figure it out. But I'm doing the bird thing, and everything else is going to fit in around that one way or the other, you know?
Well, I mean, what in the early part of your life, at least, or before what you've been doing for a while now, I mean, what kind of different jobs and different things were you doing to kind of fit,
Yeah.
all this stuff in and around your life?
Yeah, when I was a teenager, the first serious job I had was working at a veterinary clinic. I was just the kennel kid, cleaning the kennels and whatnot. And I learned that fast, and I really picked that up. And that's where the idea of veterinary medicine as a career entered my mind. And, I kind of headed towards being a vet tech. I was gaining tremendous amounts of knowledge but again, there were always those birds pulling me back, and I knew there'd have to be a sacrifice. I knew there'd have to be a trade-off, a tremendous one in this case. I couldn't imagine just, basically dropping birds cold for 6, 8, 10 years or whatever it would have taken academically to get to become a professional in that field. So I discarded that idea. I threw that out the window, and then I've done other things that I've been able to just blend the two together. I worked in a garage as a kid. My older brother was one of the head mechanics, and I was just the run around kid who did whatever. And, I'd bring my bird to work. I'd have a kestrel on a perch in a corner. I worked later on in my, say, late 20s, I worked for a beer distributor for quite a while. Maybe it was 7, 8 years. I don't know. That's quite a while in my life. And I would drive a route all over Ulster County, and it gave me a lot of freedom because I was on my own. I had a company van, and I could go wherever I wanted as long as I got my route done, taking care of all these stores that I had on my route. Nobody bothered me. Nobody was breathing down my neck. I had a really good relationship with my boss. He gave me a ton of freedom. So you can imagine, there's 3 or 4 falcons in the back of the van, the cargo van, and I would stop and hawk them or exercise them wherever I felt like it or wherever I wanted to. And I still got my work done. I worked very hard at my job, and I made sure that I was really, really good at my job so that I wouldn't raise any red flags because I didn't want anybody breathing down my neck or seeing the birds I had in the back of the van, that kind of craziness. But yeah, it was actually right after the beer job when I started considering doing the bird shows professionally, because I was tagging along with my buddy Ray Penna, who I had mentioned earlier. He was doing that sort of thing full time, and he was doing it at a very high level, flying birds off a horseback at Renaissance fairs and so forth when nobody else was doing that. And again, he's the one I got a real great foundation for as far as training birds and learning about weight management and so forth. So I would tag along with him to these Renaissance festivals. And although I never really got the urge to be a Rennie and do that sort of thing, it lit a fire in my head that, hey, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to make this work professionally, personally, whatever the package might be. So I started just going out and doing little things. I started out with one bird. I started out with, one falcon, and it slowly built, very slowly. And I got a job at a place called the Hudson Valley Raptor Center in Dutchess County in probably 2000. And that was a rehab facility, and it was a big one. It was the only real decent one in the area. I mean, it had, like 150 birds there, big elaborate barns, very nice place. And they hired me to do their educational programs, their flight demonstrations on the weekends. And part of the gig was I could live there. So I lived there, and I was in heaven, I mean, I had big barns full of birds of prey. My birds had the best accommodations possible. I could do whatever I wanted Monday through Friday. All I had to do was crank out 2 shows on Saturday and Sunday and entertain and educate the folks the public that came to the facility. So that's when that solidified my desire that this is it. One way or the other, I'm making this work. And so I did that for 4 or 5 years. And then right around 2004 or 5, I knew I had a choice to make because, oh, by the way, I was still doing the beer distributor job Monday through Friday, right? And they were coming together to the point where I had to make the leap. I had to either decide, okay, keep falconry as a hobby or go 100% because there weren't enough hours in the day to accommodate both my regular job and my bird fanaticism. So I quit the beer job, and here we are.
Did you at least get any free beer or discounts on beer?
Yeah.
There had to be other perks to the job, man.
I partook of a few beers, just a few. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's I don't know. It might have made it just a little bit harder decision, I guess, in a way.
It was a freewheeling party lifestyle back in those days. Yeah, it sure was.
Yeah, I think one of the last times that I really had to kind of think about whether or not I was doing life wrong in general was whenever I was going through Eastern Europe, or parts of Europe, I should say. And I went and saw some of those bird of prey shows at some of those castles and stuff in like Austria and stuff. And I was fortunate enough to make some friends over at some of those bird shows. And if any of them are listening, hello. I would love to make it back there again sometime. But they took me. I introduced myself after one of their shows was over, and they took me into the back of the castle and showed me all the different, housing for the birds and stuff, and showed me all the different species they had, and showed me, all these different things. And they're like, yeah, we live here and take care of the bird. I'm like, wait a second. You live in a castle and you get paid for it. And you fly these birds, and I hate my life.
Rough
Thank
life,
you.
right?
Yeah. And they were like, well, there's pluses and minuses. You can't really do much. Can't do much. I'm like, but you're living in a castle and you're getting paid for it. And it's so, I mean, I can see where that fire was probably lit in you to make that final leap. Then if you're, like I said, if you're able to have your housing taken care of and you're getting to do all this cool stuff. And how hard of a time did you have then building up your team and, making the transition into doing it completely for yourself then after working for this other place?
That's a good question, because I don't have any recollection of like really having any extended periods of,
it was all the beer, probably.
Starving artist. Yeah. The beer helped. The beer absolutely helped. But I don't have any stories of the starving artist who, lived under a bridge or whatever and had a real hard time until, it came, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it came together pretty smoothly. I worked really hard at it. I took a tremendous amount of pride in doing it, like I've done everything. I mean, even with the beer job, I joke about it, but I did that job to the absolute best of my ability. Whatever I do, I do the best I can, and it just kind of happened like it. I had a couple of more shows. Things would pop up. The phone would ring. Somebody saw me there and referred me to this person. And I mean, times were lean. Hey, times can be lean now. It's a seasonal thing. It's, it's a tough way to make a living. But back then I didn't feel it so much. I mean, hey, I'm in my 20s, So, I drink a couple of beers instead of eating lunch, It's like I didn't need that much, man. I was living on adrenaline, and I was loving it, and slowly I was just able to piece it together more and more. And one of the things I think that has served me well through all the years is that I took it so seriously, and I did every show like it was my last, and that there was somebody in that audience that I really should impress. And every kid out there is watching this, and I want those kids to get the right idea. I want them to see what this is about. I was lucky enough when I was young to be exposed to the right people that taught me the right things, and if there was only one thing in life I could do, that's what I wanted it to be, to pass along the correct information. And it was a slow grind, but I've made it this far.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you've been enjoying yourself doing it too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
I doubted. Trust me, I doubted myself more times than I could count. I drank my sorrows away and my thoughts of poverty away quite a few times. But giving up was never an option. It just wasn't.
Well, good for you. I'm glad that it ended up working out for you.
Thanks. Yeah.
I mean, not everybody has that degree of resilience, and I mean, to be able to continue to push through and I mean, for those people that the whole failure is not an option thing, I mean, it's admirable. And it's always nice to hear when things work out, because just because you really wanted it to work out doesn't mean it had to work out.
There's probably plenty of times when it doesn't, and I feel for those people,
Yeah. Well, and as far as your personal falconry goes, then, I mean, you kind of were describing being able to work in your falconry kind of in and around your beer routes and your bird shows and all that stuff. But I guess kind of transitioning to the topic that's kind of brought us all together this week is, I mean, at what point then did you decide that you wanted to start incorporating, the dogs into your falconry, and, particularly dachshunds? I mean, what was the point that kind of made you decide to bring that into the whole picture?
Well, I don't think it was like one specific aha moment, but I remember it was back around 2000, and I was busting my butt out there every day with a red tail. And I guess if you could see the areas I hawked, you'd understand. I used to come home just bloody, thorns everywhere, but, limited slips, so many misses because of thick cover, all the things that rabbits do to escape. And I just knew there was a better way. I'm like, there's got to be a better way, And I was raised in an outdoor family. My brothers had hunting dogs. They had Springer Spaniels. They had retrievers. And, I knew all about working dogs. So I said, that's when the seed was planted. And I basically... I'm kind of a research freak, and I can be pretty analytical and just think about things before I leap. And I thought to myself, okay, if I'm going to look at this dog situation, it's probably going to come down to 3 breeds. I just based on my own very little knowledge, I said it's going to be a Beagle, a Jack Russell, or a Dachshund. I need something small to get into the cover to a degree. It's got to have a nose. It's got to have drive. Any one of those could fit that bill. So I don't know if I contacted anyone else first, or if my first call was to the famous dachshund lady. But I specifically remember looking through an issue of, probably it was American Falconry or something like that back then. And she had an ad, hunting dachshunds, working dachshunds, Teddy Moritz. And I said, well, hey, here's a good place to start as any. So I called her blind. And we just hit it off. I mean, we ended up talking for like an hour and a half on the phone. And we just became fast friends. And at the time, she didn't have any puppies available. And not on top of that, she's, got a waiting list as long as the phone book. So she said, listen, I don't have a litter of puppies, but my line is out there, and I can recommend a guy in Maryland who has some of my dogs. They're real good dogs. I wouldn't hesitate to recommend them. You could give him a call. I said, sure. So I called him up the very next day. His name was Ted Damron, and he was a falconer. He was in Rising Sun, Maryland at the time. And he, lo and behold, he had puppies that were just coming of age to find homes. And I said to him, what have you got? What should I do? And he says, well, tell me what you're looking for. And I said, listen, I don't know anything about gender in these dogs. I've heard and read about them. I said, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to tell you what I want. You tell me. I want you to pretend you're picking a dog out of who you have there for yourself. Which one would be the dog you would take? And he said, well, my son took a male because he wanted a male. And he said, but I have this little female right here, and she checks all the boxes, and that'd be the one I take. I said, sold. Tell me when I can come and get her. And that was it. So, a couple weeks later, as soon as she was on solid food, I was on my way to Maryland, and I picked her up. And again, I think that was March or April of 2001. and I named her Chase, and she became my constant companion. You know, she was on the road with me, you know, wherever I went, whether it was a show or still doing the beer route, she was with me. And she was my teacher. She taught me all about the world of dachshunds. And she also taught me how incredibly valuable they are to the whole process. And, you know, it's funny, that same guy, God bless him, Ted's passed away also, but he said one thing that stuck with me for years. I mean, I'm the kind of guy who can't remember what he ate for lunch yesterday, but I can remember quotes and things that involve falconry 30 years later, like they were yesterday. And Ted Dameron said, we were talking about the importance of the dogs in the hunt and the sport. And he said, I wouldn't even, I'd quit. If I couldn't run dachshunds, I'd quit. I wouldn't even fly birds anymore. And that really took me back. I was like, what? I was like, this guy's crazy. You know, I thought to myself, what'd you get into first, the dogs or the birds? You were into the birds, you were into falconry, you know, and I was obsessed with falconry all my life. And to me, a dog was a helper. It was a part of it, but I had no idea how much of a part of it they can be. So when I got my first dog and when we really worked at it and we were going through the first couple of seasons and that dog clicked and became a superstar, I said, I'll be damned. I know what he meant. I know what he meant, because over the years I bred that dog and I built a little family group. And I mean, there were times when I was out there with 5 or 6 of them at a time. I wouldn't recommend that, by the way. But I knew exactly what he meant, and I agree wholeheartedly. I don't know if I'd practice the sport if I couldn't have my dogs with me.
And I think that's another interesting point that I've kind of somewhat broached on with some other guys, in that it may not start with their falconry, like with the whole dog thing.
Yeah.
But inevitably, when people incorporate dogs into whatever they're doing, it eventually almost becomes more about the dogs even than the birds.
100%.
And that's what I kind of have found interesting in talking. And it doesn't really matter what the breed is either.
Yeah.
And, you know, like there's a lot of these guys that if you held a gun to their head after having both in their lives, and you say, okay, you got to pick the dogs or the birds, which one? And almost all of them unanimously would choose the dogs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it wouldn't even be hesitation.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to hold a gun to my head.
But there's some guys that may be a little bit harder, or some gals that might be a little bit harder decision than others. But I think by the time it's all said and done, if you had somebody take a lie detector test, they would still end up probably choosing the dogs over the birds in the long run. And there's some people that just adamantly refuse to have dogs, and I totally get that too. I mean, I do. But it's one of those weird conveniences. It's kind of like air conditioning or something. Like if you get used to something and you just get so used to it and used to having it around and enjoying it, and it just becomes part of that next thing. Yeah. You know, it's like, or even like internet. You have make people choose between water or internet. Most of them are still going to choose the internet.
It's surprising, but yeah. You know, and the dogs, they bleed into your personal life so much more that the birds don't, and they can't because they're just not capable.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So they affect just different aspects of our lives in different ways, and it's been nothing but an absolute joy. Don't get me wrong; they can be the most frustrating, stubborn little you-know-whats on planet Earth, and they can have you pulling your hair out one minute and then you know laughing with joy the next. Whereas birds, being the practical things that they are, they're not gonna get in. They're not gonna weave their way into your heart the way a dog will. You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and of course, the birds can have you pulling what little hair you have left out too.
If you have any left, the birds will they'll get the rest of it. Yeah,
sure, yeah. And You know, especially the guys that fly certain species more so than others. You know, Goshawks. But anyway, I've seen more guys that have had more frustrations with certain species than others, I think. But and you're a red tail guy too, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you've pretty much gotten used to a systematic approach then of getting passage red tails to fly with your dachshunds.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so explain that a little bit. Like, how do you go about socializing them in the beginning and getting them used to each other and hunting together then?
Well, basically, as much exposure as possible from the beginning. Let's say I don't start the bird feeding the bird, manning the bird with no dogs around. From the time that bird's hood comes off, when I've taken him off the ridge, if I have food in my glove, there's going to be a dachshund somewhere in that room, and sometimes more than one. And if it takes a little bit longer for that bird to break and want to eat its first meal, so be it. We got time, but you're not doing it without the dogs here. And that's pretty much the way I handle day-to-day everything. Well, once they're eating on the glove, I train them the same way anybody else would train or man another bird for the most part, basics, but with the dog there or the dog's there.
Always present, no matter what.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah. And that was another little piece of advice that Ted Damron gave me. Now, everybody, you know how it is in falconry, most opinionated people in the world, and you're going to have 10 different ideas on how that could or should be done, and it might be right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care.
Falconers and their opinions,
works
man.
for me. This is what I do.
Yeah.
I don't critique what anybody else does. If you're going to eat, you're going to do it in front of that dog. And then we go outside, and then we get on the creance, and you're going to do that in front of the dog. And then you're going to fly free, and you're going to do that in front of the dog, and so forth and so on.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. So, I mean, it doesn't sound like you do much different than what a lot of people do then, and, just incorporating them in the everyday regimen, basically. Yeah. And as far as just going back to dachshunds specifically then, with I've been asking the same couple questions or so to a lot of guys during the series and getting just a widespread. It's kind of almost my little study, my little dachshund study.
Yeah.
2 questions for you. What have your experiences been mainly with? I mean, when do you prefer to take a puppy home, or when do you think the best time is to take a dachshund puppy home from the breeder? And number 2, what have you done personally to try and mitigate a lot of the housebreaking issues that the breed has?
As far as taking one home, the minute I can, the minute a breeder will let me. That said, knock on wood, I've been lucky. I started out with a female. I bred from her. The family tree grew. I've never bought another dog since 2001. It's always been one that I've produced, reaching out for a different bloodline, obviously, as needed. But I knew who my females were. I knew who I wanted to litter from and what they had to contribute to what I could imagine going forward with. And same thing all breeders look at. And I've made my own team continually. As far as housebreaking goes, you could throw that out the window. I had much better luck with that. When I had 1 or 2 dogs, they were really, really good about it. They really were. But as my team or pack grew, the inmates started to run the asylum a little bit. I think that the bigger your pack or group gets, the more power they think they have. Mm-hmm. And when one starts to do one thing, then that trickles down, and it's, okay, this one can pee over here. Well, then I'm going to pee over here too. So next thing you know, you got your hands full, and you can dig yourself a big hole. So I don't have any pearls of wisdom on housebreaking a dachshund, other than trying to stay with it, and absolutely, when you draw a line in the sand, you draw a line in the sand. No means no. It doesn't mean no sometimes. It means no every single time. Otherwise, in a dog's mind, it could mean no whenever, and just make some rigid, hard rules and do your best to stick with them, and best of luck. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, like I said, the study continues, and so far it's been pretty unanimous. Yeah. No, I like I said, I as far as the puppy thing goes, I mean, there's a lot of guys that have kind of leaned more towards, like that 10 to 12 week range, a little bit older than, say your larger breeds and stuff. But yeah, I mean, as far as the house training stuff, yeah, I mean, your answer has been pretty on par for course with a lot of other answers that I've gotten. And, I, even with my one in particular, but with both of my two, it's funny. Sometimes I'll go a week or two, no issues,
absolutely,
whatever. And then randomly just one day, just,
what hits the fan.
Just right in the middle of the, even after you let them out and even after they both go or whatever.
I swear to God, sometimes they hold it until they come back in.
They do. They do that stuff on purpose. Little asses. And they'll sit there and stare at you the whole time too. Just
like, you watching this? You see this? Remember last time you didn't give me a piece of that rabbit? Okay, well here you go.
And I just, like I said, there's so many Germans in my life that I love and adore, but it's the German side of them.
They live up to the German stereotypes, that's for sure. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, no, it's good to hear. Like I said, I'm happy then that it's not just me.
Oh no. Trust me, it's not you.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I mean, it's cool that you've been able to kind of produce your own lines and always kind of be in the dogs that kind of have that you've originally.
It makes it more. It makes it more special to me. Much more.
You have a lot more vested interest.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I can, I can hopefully guide the breeding to produce what I'm looking for. We all know you can put two dogs together and you can get sensational, or you can get, average, above average, whatever it might be. But it's nice. It makes me feel good to be able to make that call. Whatever happens, it's my fault, good or bad. But yeah, the being invested is a way to look at it. Being invested and being able to watch that little guy grow and see, hey, more like the mother or the father. What are the strengths and weaknesses of this little dog, and so forth and so on.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's one of the things that I'm kind of tempted to. It's part of the reason why I looked into the whole, doing the field trials and different things like that, is because there is a part of me that's tempted to go ahead and stud my two males out at some point if anybody's ever interested in that or whatever the case is. But I think I probably have the same interest for the same reason. I just think it would be really nice to have, a father and a son or whatever.
Sure,
I mean, I've got two males, so I'm probably going to stick with males now. I'm forever cursed with the males, probably. I don't, after talking to so many people, I've definitely discovered that it's not great to have the male and male and female both. But I don't know, man. Well, I mean, that's cool stuff, and thanks for sharing that. But,
sure.
But as far as like the other parts of falconry that are important to you, I mean, what other aspects make it continue to be so worthwhile to you? I know that we were kind of talking about trapping and stuff before briefly. Yeah. I know that's something that you also enjoy doing, that aspect of it also, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, what aspect of trapping is the most fun to you?
Oh, geez. I wouldn't even know where to start. All of it and everything. It's from the time I first did it, on a ridge or on a beach when I was 14, I was just hooked. I mean, it's one of the most exciting things I've ever done in my life, and it never gets old. It just never gets old. I mean, we're talking about, I probably spent my first day trapping on a ridge in 1981 or 2, and still, you get up there and it's just it's magic. I'm sure other people who are really, really into other things have certain moments or time periods that give them that same kind of excitement and joy. But the trapping, the excitement, the unknowns, the anticipation, all of it is amazing. There's nothing like it.
Do you prefer one type of trapping over the other as far as ridge versus beach, or?
Oh, yeah, beach.
Yeah.
No, there's no question. I mean, they both offer their, they're both exciting. They're both different, and it depends on, are you primarily trapping, are you there to catch a bird for yourself? Are you there to catch a bird for a friend? Is that person's with you looking for a bird? How desperate is somebody for a bird? These goshawk fanatics, they go out and they got to trap for 3 weeks to catch one bird. So when they do, it's, the excitement is off the charts. I go trapping expecting to catch a redtail. That doesn't mean it's not exciting for me. It's a thrill to pull that bird out of that net. But so there's different factors I think at play there for each individual. But the beach to me, with the falcons and the atmosphere, the sounds, the smells, and just there's something about a falcon that is, they're at another level. There's a legend to them. There's just
it's a stigma.
I'm still in awe when I have a peregrine in my hand. I mean, I get flashbacks to when I was, a little kid. And again, that's something that never changes. Two distinctly different atmospheres. Great excitement to both. But if I had to pick, beach.
And do you have kind of that system down pat? And I guess I should say I've been somewhat spoiled a little bit by the beach trapping experience by getting a chance to see how certain guys have their setups. And I had a chance back in, I think it was like 2019, I think, to go down and see how, like, for example, Eric Edwards and those guys, trap and stuff on the beach where they trap at, and seeing how they have everything rigged up around like the beach house they stay at and so on and so forth. And that was like the Ritz-Carlton of like, of the trapping setup. And I was just like, man, you guys have this down perfect.
And that doesn't come overnight. I'm sure that the reason that they've got it that way is because they've been at it for a long time, and shaping and fine tuning and shining and polishing. The people who are successful with it, I think are a lot of the same people that are successful with falconry itself and hunting with birds. No detail is too small, and everything means something.
What's your setup like on the beach then? Or you just pitch a tent somewhere and set up some bow nets? And
No, I drive. Living in New York, I mean, it's a bit of a haul, but I do drive. There's been times when I've, spent a night, a couple nights at a seedy motel because it was 5 minutes away from my trapping site. But no, I prefer to, I go home, and I get up at the crack. I get up at, I got to get up at 3 a.m., and drive for 2.5 hours to get where I got to go. Set up as early as I can. I use mist nets, and I'll set them up in 2 sides, 3 sides. Ideally, 3-sided, basically a box with the rear side being open, and pop-up blind, and a couple types of bait out there: ringneck dove, starling, and/or sparrow, and buckle your chin straps and get ready on the right day.
And I'm assuming that hopefully I would think that maybe there's not, maybe you're just that hardcore about it, but I figure, bring maybe a generator with a really long extension cord, bring a, portable air conditioner on inside the blind enough, and also like enough outlets also for a small portable fridge for the beer, at least a fan or something in there. I mean,
you could certainly make it home if you wanted to, but I'm a bare minimum kind of a guy. If it doesn't have any function in the equipment scheme of things, I'm lucky I bring a sandwich and a gallon of water.
I think AC and a small fridge for beer would serve plenty of function in a situation like that. Personally, but
you're right. You're right.
Oh, that's cool, man. Now, to each their own. I mean, as long as you're having fun doing it and not dying of heat stroke, I guess, sitting in a blind on the beach.
Yeah. No, it can be it can be hot. it can be, I mean, like any other form of trapping, or, I compare it to fishing, you got days when it's so hot you can't set your rod down. You got other days where you just sit there wondering, like, I could be mowing the lawn today. I could be doing this. I could be doing that. What am I doing down here? But, hey, that's what keeps you coming back. I think it's part of it. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually, it's going to sound crazy, but both of my knees are really basically destroyed from trapping on the beach all those years, from just the fanaticism of spotting birds coming in our direction, to running into the pop-up blind and diving onto my knees and grabbing the binoculars all in one motion out the window to identify, see where it was and whatnot. I'm a 200 plus pound guy, and I'm literally throwing my weight onto my knees in hard packed sand over and over and over again. Could be 50 times a day, and go down there half a dozen times a year. I walk like a cripple in November and December. Now I walk like a cripple year round, and I don't think it's a coincidence. But
well, that's cool, man. No, I'm glad that you were able to find the I guess the passion within the passion within the passion. Then
yeah,
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it seems like you're definitely one of these guys that's ate up with all facets of it.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, and as far as, I guess this will be a good time to go ahead and transition to the meat and potatoes part of the podcast, being, getting one or two of your favorite experiences, either, stories about, one of your hunting experiences, birds, dogs, whatever the case may be, and go ahead and share a couple of those if you don't care.
I think of the most ridiculous little things. Like one instance was I had this really, really good hunting spot. It was pretty big. It was expansive, and it could support, 4 or 5 guys all having birds and flying and moving to different areas. And he spent years coming up there. One time, one of my very close friends, who's, believe me, my circle of friends is as small as it can be, came up, and his goshawk wasn't cooperating, which never happens. He threw his lure up into the air, and lure buggy whipped around the power line and was just hanging there, swinging back and forth like the pendulum on a clock. And the goshawk is looking at it in a tree, trying to decide what to do. And I think at one point it flew over and bound to the lure. So now the goshawk is hanging upside down, flapping, holding the lure in midair. Didn't want to let it go. It all worked out in the end. We got the bird down. We got some big long stick and finagled the lure off the wire and everything. But just stupid stuff like that happening. I won't name who it was, but he'll know who he is when he hears this.
That's great.
Well, here's one. I haven't flown much in the way of goshawks. I tried one imprint. And the bird was doing really, really well, and everything I could expect a bird to do, right about the time when I was starting to enter it on baggies and getting ready to get out into the field. And my personal situation changed. I had to move. I had to move out of that raptor center. And that said, there was no room for a goshawk. With their special requirements and so forth, I knew the best thing for that bird would be to place him in another home. So I did that, and I guess that bird went on to have a good falconry career. The Jersey boys knew that, put me in touch with the guy that I gave the bird to. And where was I? What was the original question? Where was I going with this?
Funny story. You needed to. You had another story. You said that you needed to. You were moving out of the Raptor Center and needed to rehome this goshawk.
It had something to do with the goshawk.
Yeah.
Oh, it really just leading up to the fact that that was my first experience with a goshawk. I never got to follow through with that, so I never experienced it down the road. So I said, okay, well, my next foray is going to be a passage goshawk. So I caught a passage female goshawk, and I went through utter misery, and I trained it and worked it, and I did everything, so-called by the book, and then some by my own book and all of that stuff. And, sure enough, I started catching rabbits with the bird, and she was a terror, and she worked over my dachshund like, there was no tomorrow. And I just remember having such limited experience and having that kind of success. It was absolutely, it was just intoxicating to me, because I know how hard they are. I knew how hard they were then. It's one of the reasons I never tackled them in the first place. And I know my limitations as far as my patience goes. And I want to be able to do right by a bird. And Lord knows those things need just a little patience. And it was either that bird or the next bird. I'd let the one go because I knew that it was like a two-phase situation. You hunt with your gosh, you go through all that, you get it going. But now, the whole rest of the season, where am I going to put this? How am I going to molt it? How am I going to keep it from breaking feathers? Well, how much should this bird see of the outside world? And on and on and on. And I was just like, yeah, you know what? I don't think so. It may have been the first bird or the second bird. I did it again. Again, I had success with the bird. And I went out one day, and with that passage Goshawk, she caught 3 rabbits in 45 minutes. And that was just one of those instances of a little snippet that, when I'm laying on my deathbed and I'm like staring at the ceiling, I'll be like, I remember that passage Goshawk I caught 3 rabbits in 45 minutes, It's one of those crazy things, So that's a couple. If anything else comes up, I'll let you know. But there's just volumes of them.
So you're not going to be laying on your deathbed also thinking about all the time that you spent having to exert that much extra patience with that bird just to catch three rabbits within 45 minutes.
Touche. That's a good point. Yeah. Sometimes it works out, and sometimes it's well worth it. Yeah. Well, no, I remember when those birds were going good, when those birds were flying good, they did things that I didn't even think a bird could do. It's like they defied physics, Those birds would rocket off the fist after a rabbit and go through this whole convoluted twisting, turning flight through holes in the foliage and down and wing over, and I'd hear the scream, and it all happened so fast that I wasn't even sure what I saw. Like, I didn't even make in. I didn't even run over there. The birds got the rabbit, have fun, and I just sat there. I said, what did that bird do? It went that way, and then it went that way, and then it folded and shot down through that little hole in those vines I see over there. I think that's what it did. So fast that the human mind, or at least my human mind, maybe mine's a little slower than most, I could not follow it step by step as it played out in front of me. I replayed it all the rest of the day, the way home, the next day, when I'm laying in bed that night, I'm like, that Goshawk did this and that. So when they're going good, forget about it. There's nothing like it. But you got to be able to put up with all the other stuff to get to that point. And for me, short term, it was a great ride. Short, exciting ride. Like getting on a roller coaster and getting off. But I don't ride roller coasters every year, every month, or whatever. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, more of a
back to Red Tails. I went.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's easier just to kind of coast down the water park's lazy river.
Yeah, absolutely.
A nice floaty.
Yeah.
Sipping the daiquiri or whatever. Yeah. Or in some people's cases, White Claws. And
I'm not. I'm not an old geezer, but I'm no spring chicken anymore. And with the knees I got, it's I've always been very, let's say, participatory in my falconry. I've always been out there running with the dogs, trying to flush as many rabbits as the dogs did, tearing off after my bird. I never stood around and was one of these guys who watching and wondering what was happening. I was following the action. I tried to be in the action, and my body's taken a toll over the years, and I can't do the things I used to do because of my knees. So I'm going to get my knees replaced, and maybe it'll add a few more years.
Right. That'll fix it.
Yeah, that'll fix it.
Awesome, man. Well, that's like I said, I don't know. There's so many guys that I know that fly Goshawks that are starting to get up in years a little bit, and the wear and tear is starting to, and I joke with them all the time. I'm like, you're either going to have to start saving now and investing in like a hover round or something, or some kind of, all-terrain, whatever, because I'm not scooting your ass around in a wheelchair, so you can fly one of those things.
The place you got to go and get into, not only to chase your game, but to recover your bird. I've been on my belly, sliding along on the ice and the snow, just reaching out as far as I possibly could to get the very end of a jest that the goshawk is mantling and looking the other way, trying to move forward through the multiflora to get farther away from me. And I'm just gritting my teeth and stretching my arm, and I finally pinch down on the end of that one jest so I can slowly slide her back to me and get the situation under control. I can do without that.
But that other 45 seconds, man, it was so worth it, right?
Yeah. Well, here's another thing that had a lot to do with the fact that I never went ahead with Goshawks. I was spoiled. I've known these guys, we affectionately call them the Jersey Boys, for a very long time, and they practice the sport at a high level. If I want to see a goshawk fly, I'm like, what am I, stupid? I'm just going to go hawking with them. It doesn't have to be my bird. It's great. I get to go. I get to beat the bush. I get to have fun. We get to, bust each other's, and I get to see great flight, and then I get to go home, and I don't have to carry that goshawk home with me. I don't have to see it again. So it's been good. It's been great. You know?
It's kind of like babysitting a family member's kids or something.
Bingo.
Or whatever. Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah. An ill-mannered child. Exactly.
That's fantastic. Oh, that's great, man. Well, this has been a fun conversation, and I think that's probably a good note that we can wrap on. But before we do the final wrap, I'm going to do like having so many conversations before and see if you're willing to share, that best piece of advice that you can think of or sentiment for current and future generations of falconers, and just whatever comes to mind as far as that goes, and then we can call this good, bud.
Ooh, that's a valuable one that requires some thought too. The sport has changed so much in recent history due to the internet and social media that it's a blessing and a curse, I think, and I think it's real easy for people getting involved in the sport to see, the glamour of it all and the shine of it, and it looks all fresh and new and wonderful, and they just can't wait to dive right in without knowing what goes on behind the scenes, what gets you, from point A to Z. It's a whole long journey, and there's a lot in there, man, and it's a rough road. So I think that's kind of a problem, and I think one of the biggest things that somebody getting involved or thinking about getting involved in the sport can not only make sure what you read and look at, you take it with a grain of salt. You use your common human sense. Sometimes the more people talk, and certainly the more they brag, the less they have to offer. You've got to find yourself a good sponsor. They may be few and far between, but I know they're out there. I couldn't tell you how to find him or her. You're going to you should know it when you find it or feel it. When in doubt, wait. Be patient. It's hard sometimes. Try to get out hawking with as many people as you can. And realize that the decision you make going forward can have huge implications on not only your falconry, but your bird and your bird's life and the quality of life for that bird. So
after asking so many people the same question over and over again, there's inevitably a lot of the same answers, but sometimes from different angles and different perspectives. And also, as I've mentioned many times before, there's some things that people can't hear enough from a whole myriad of people. And things like that, I think, are important because yeah, there's under all the glitz, glamour, and supposed really cool, shine on top, man. There's like you said, there's a lot of layers of dirt underneath that you gotta that you gotta dig through to get the most out of this stuff.
The guy's gonna put on Instagram his Cooper's hawk flying down a rabbit in spectacular style. He's not gonna take a selfie with the bird hanging off of his face and his face bleeding profusely. You know what I mean? So.
How to get those scars?
because his sponsor failed to tell him about a small but important detail. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, man, this has been a pleasure. And real quick before we jump off, I mean, do you want to go ahead and go ahead and give the name of your business again, so people can maybe check it out if they ever swing through the area or anything? Or
sure. Thanks for the opportunity. It's a very modest little project that I put together myself and started from scratch. And I recently, a couple of years ago, got married, and my wife has been a huge help, both from the business aspect of it. And, I'm fortunate she was a zookeeper in Miami for I think 9 years, and a very high-end vet tech for going on 40 years now. She's really got the medical side covered. And administrative and business wise, she's really been a help. So it's grown and gotten much better in the last couple of years. But my program is called Skyhunters in Flight, and we've got a modest website. I've never been a tech person. That's another thing she's pushing me to do, is get a real good website up and get on Instagram and get on Twitter and do this and that and all the fun things that Casey does. So yeah, I'm going to be working on that because that's a part of the business that I have to address. But as far as the birds go, I take a tremendous amount of pride in providing an educational show because I want to, my wife often says, hey, if you can reach one kid in this audience, we did our job today. I was right place, right time kind of a kid. Well, maybe my show would be the right place and the right time for a certain kind of kid. And I get kids that are so unbelievably astute and intelligent and ask questions. They know what an accipiter is. They blow my mind with the intelligence of their questions. They talk way over their heads, so to speak. And I'm like, you know what? You're just like me. I was the same little bird nerd when I was your age. And other kids, I go into inner cities, they wouldn't know the difference between a hawk and a chicken. And that's pretty scary. And in a time when people are so often disassociated from nature because they're staring at, computer screens or their phones, I could see it being a dying or a lost art. And I like to be able to just be as truthful and as practical and as sensible as possible to educate people, and especially children, about what birds of prey are and how important they are to the environment around us, the job they do as predators. But anybody can go out there and talk about it. There's plenty of people who do bird programs that, read a Wikipedia page and they go out and they recite that to the public, and that's all well and good. But I work really hard to actively fly birds in the show. I mean, literally every show, doesn't matter. An owl, a hawk, and a falcon in a sequence, and in some way or another illustrates how they hunt in the wild. So it's been a labor of love. It's been a tremendous amount of hard work. I wouldn't change a thing. Hopefully onward and upward. Maybe in a year or two I'll be able to pay all my bills on time.
That's a good goal to have, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally can relate to the labor of love thing. So I commend you, and can hope that you have continued success and it keeps growing for you.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Cool.
Hopefully I'm in the area sometime and can swing through and pay you a visit also. I mean, who knows? I might have to come and
we can fly some birds.
Yeah, fly some birds, or I'll bring the mini fridge with me and the generator, and
Load it up.
You can pitch that tin on the side of the beach there, and we can trap some peregrines and some merlins or whatever.
You got to go through an application process to be allowed onto the trapping site. It's an exclusive.
Is
it's
it
classified?
It sounds pretty exquisite.
Took years for Casey to get his foot in the door, but finally made it.
Well, that's understandable though.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that that you don't bring too many shady characters into any operation.
Exactly.
But like I said, man, thanks again for the time and for the drive down and hanging out. And yeah, I mean, like I said, we'll talk some more, and it's been great.
Same here. Pleasure was mine. Have a great day.
You too, bud.
Yep.